It focuses on the visceral experience described in legends. The impossible smell of damp earth and exotic blossoms hanging in the dry Mesopotamian air. The sound of water cascading down a man-made mountain, a sound that shouldn't be there. The sight of towering trees whose roots are suspended stories above the desert floor. This isn't a description of a ruin, it's a reconstruction of a phantom memory. A perfect, pristine image. The narration then pivots sharply, revealing the shocking endpoint. This entire sensory world, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, is a ghost. It exists with detailed measurements and descriptions in historical texts. But it is utterly absent from the records of the very civilization that supposedly built it, and no definitive trace has ever been found in the soil of Babylon. The wonder isn't the garden, it's the void it left behind. And now, please stop the video and subscribe to our channel. To be able to keep making videos like this, we need to reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Thank you. That void, that phantom memory in the dust of Babylon, wasn't born from nothing. It was filled by a story, a legend so powerful and so beautiful that it built a reality all its own, brick by imaginary brick. The men who gave us this blueprint were not eyewitnesses. They were historians and geographers writing hundreds of years after the last flower in this supposed garden had turned to dust. A Babylonian priest named Berossus, whose work survives only because it was quoted by the later historian Josephus, is the first to plant the seed. He is followed by others, like the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus and the geographer Strabo, each adding another layer of detail, another coat of polish to the legend. And the story they tell is perfect. Almost too perfect. It's a love story. They speak of the great King Nebuchadnezzar II and his young wife, a queen from the green, mountainous land of Media. Can you picture her, trapped in the flat, sun-baked expanse of Mesopotamia? A world of baked brick and dust, her heart aching for the cool, verdant hills of her home. So the king, in a staggering act of love and raw power, decides he won't just comfort her. He will build her a mountain. He will construct a paradise that replicates her lost homeland. A defiant act of green in an endless, beige world. It's a beautiful, pristine origin story, but this wasn't just a fairy tale whispered down the ages. These writers didn't just give us a why. They gave us a how. They left behind a detailed forensic blueprint with measurements and engineering specifications so precise, so audacious, that for centuries no one dared to question them. And that blueprint wasn't a sketch. It was a masterclass in impossible engineering, a set of instructions so detailed they feel like they were read directly from the builder's own records. Diodorus Siculus gives us the chilling dimensions. A perfect square, each side stretching 400 feet, the footprint of a modern city block, rising into the sky. But this wasn't a solid structure, it was a lie. A beautiful lie held up by a forest of hollow, cube-shaped pillars, each one packed tight with earth, strong enough to support the roots of colossal trees. It was a tiered ziggurat of life, a theater of botany where each level was a stage. But think about it. How do you stop a mountain from weeping? How do you contain an ocean of wet earth suspended in the sky? A constant, crushing weight of water trying to rot its way through your palace? The answer is a testament to sheer genius. The uppermost tiers were sealed with a complex, multi-layered skin. First, a bed of reeds packed in thick asphalt, a black, viscous seal against the moisture. On top of that, a double layer of baked tiles. And finally, the most shocking and expensive detail of all, a final sheath of lead, a soft gray metal membrane to ensure not a single drop could penetrate the vaults below. At its heart, a ceaseless, grinding pulse. Strabo tells us how they fed the beast, lifting water from the Euphrates River day and night. It was a machine, a great bronze water-raising screw, a mechanical serpent spiraling upwards, carrying the river into the sky. But a machine needs an engine, and the engine was human. Men working in shifts, in the dark, turning the screw without end. Their lives spent powering a paradise they would likely never enter. With a blueprint this precise, with every joint and mechanism accounted for, finding it should have been easy. It should have been waiting in the dust for us. So, for more than a century, that's exactly what we did. We started digging, with a blueprint that detailed, that forensically precise. The search was inevitable. For centuries, the gardens were a ghost story. But in 1899, the hunt for their body began in earnest. The search became the life's work of one man, a German archaeologist named Robert Koldewey. This wasn't a summer project, it was an obsession. For 18 years, from 1899 to 1917, Koldewey waged a war against the dust, dedicating his life to resurrecting the dead city of Babylon from its grave. Imagine the scene. The punishing sun, the choking dust, the slow, painstaking work of thousands of laborers moving millions of tons of earth, one basket at a time. He unearthed wonders, the foundations of the great ziggurat, the majestic Ishtar Gate, the processional way. But year after year, the one prize he sought, the one wonder that had drawn him there, remained a phantom. And then, in the northeast corner of the southern palace, his men hit something strange, something that didn't fit. It was a basement, a series of 14 vaulted rooms, but they were built with impossibly thick walls, unlike anything else in the palace. You have to feel the jolt of adrenaline in Koldewey's heart, the culmination of a decade of hope. Could this be it? The location was right. The vaulted ceilings matched the descriptions of the Greek writers. The thick walls, engineered to support an immense, crushing weight from above. After a lifetime of searching, he believed he had found it. This strange stone skeleton buried in the corner of the palace wasn't just a basement. It was the load-bearing foundation of a legend. And buried inside one of those rooms, he would find one final, peculiar clue that seemed to confirm the whole impossible story. A clue that would also, in the end, unravel everything. That peculiar clue, the one that cemented Koldewey's belief, was a well. But this was no ordinary well. It had 3 distinct, interlocking shafts, a design he had never seen before. To Koldewey, the answer was obvious. This wasn't just a well to draw water. It was the housing for a complex machine, a chain pump capable of lifting the Euphrates into the sky, the very engine of the gardens. It was the final, perfect piece of the puzzle. But when you build a case on hope, the facts have a way of becoming inconvenient. The first problem was simple: brutal geography. The structure was a huge distance from the Euphrates River, making the task of supplying it with the thousands of gallons of water it would need every day a logistical nightmare. And then, an even more damning silence. In a place that was supposedly filled with tons of rich earth, exotic trees, and flowering plants for centuries, forensic examination found nothing. No ancient pollen, no fossilized roots, no seeds. Not a single microscopic trace of a garden was ever found in the soil. And the well? That strange 3-shafted centerpiece of his theory? Modern analysis suggests it was just that. A well. A unique design, perhaps, but not the engine room of a wonder. With the evidence re-examined, the romantic image collapses, replaced by a colder, more practical reality. The thick walls weren't for supporting trees, they were for fortification and insulation. The vaulted rooms weren't for holding earth, they were for storing goods, likely vast quantities of grain and valuable sesame oil. Koldewey hadn't found a lost wonder. He had found a high-security storage complex. The only physical evidence ever discovered was a red herring. This failure forced researchers to look away from the ground and back to the beginning, back to the ancient texts themselves. And that's when they discovered a hole in the story so vast, so obvious, it had been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years. The search in the dust had ended in a frustrating dead end. The only physical clue was a red herring, and this failure forced researchers to look away from the ground and back to the beginning, back to the ancient texts themselves. And that's when they discovered a hole in the story so vast, so obvious, it had been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years. The real horror isn't what the records say, It's what they don't. You have to understand who King Nebuchadnezzar II was. This was not a humble man. He was one of the greatest builders in the history of the world. A king obsessed with his own legacy, and he made sure everyone knew it. His name is stamped on millions of the very bricks that built his city. He left behind epic, sprawling inscriptions that boast in painstaking detail about every temple he restored, every canal he dredged, every monumental wall he raised to the gods. He tells us everything, everything. In all of those royal records, in every one of the thousands of cuneiform tablets that have been painstakingly recovered and translated from his reign, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon are never mentioned. Not once, not a single word, not a whisper, not a hint. This isn't just an oversight. It's a deafening, absolute silence from the very source that should be shouting the loudest. Imagine the official history of ancient Egypt without a mention of the pyramids. Imagine Rome without the Colosseum. It is a whole so clean, so perfect, it feels like a deliberate, surgical removal. We have a ghost. A wonder of the world with no physical body and no birth certificate from its own country. But every story, even a phantom one, has to start somewhere. The legend couldn't have come from nowhere. And if the greatest wonder of Babylon wasn't in Babylon, then where was it? With the historical record in Babylon a complete blank, the investigation was cold for centuries. The story was a phantom, a mystery with no solution. But the answer, it turns out, was hiding in the records of Babylon's greatest and most hated enemy. After decades of painstakingly re-examining ancient texts that everyone else had overlooked, Dr. Stephanie Dalley of Oxford University proposed a shocking theory. The legend of the gardens isn't a myth. It's a case of stolen identity. The gardens did exist, she argued, but they were never in Babylon. They were built 100 years earlier and hundreds of miles to the north, in the blood-soaked capital of the Assyrian Empire, Nineveh. And the builder wasn't the celebrated Nebuchadnezzar. It was his polar opposite, a man whose name was a byword for terror and conquest across the ancient world, the ruthless Assyrian king, Sennacherib. This changes everything. The romantic story of a king's love for his homesick queen evaporates, replaced by a much darker, more violent reality. We are no longer in the Babylon of scholars and astronomers. We are in the Assyria of siege engines and brutal efficiency. A military superpower that carved its empire from the flesh of its neighbors. But a claim this audacious, one that rewrites one of the greatest stories in history, needs more than a theory. It needs a confession. And Sennacherib, unlike Nebuchadnezzar, was not silent. He left behind a detailed, boastful, and absolutely chilling account of what he built in the heart of his dark kingdom. And that account is not a whisper. It is a roar. Where the Babylonian records gave us nothing but silence, the Assyrian annals give us a full-throated confession, written in stone and clay. Sennacherib, a king who documented his every slaughter, also documented his every creation. In his palace inscriptions, he boasts of raising his palace on a high platform and creating a terraced garden right next to it, a man-made mountain to rival nature. But he doesn't just describe it, he gives it a title. He calls it, in his own words, a wonder for all peoples. A garden is just a fantasy without water, and Sennacherib's solution was not elegant. It was an act of brute force against the landscape itself. His inscriptions detail the construction of a massive canal stretching for 66 kilometers to haul water from the mountains. To cross a wide valley, he built a monumental aqueduct at Jirwan, a bridge for water made from over 2 million blocks of stone, sealed watertight with bitumen. It's a staggering feat, but it still doesn't solve the final problem: how to lift the water up into the garden's highest terraces. And this is where we find the technological smoking gun. In a description of his new bronze casting techniques, Sennacherib boasts of inventing a new process to create huge cylinders and screws of bronze. A great bronze screw, the exact technology the Greek writer Strabo attributed to the gardens. But here it is, described by an Assyrian king, 400 years before Archimedes was even born. The confession is complete. The location, the motive, the engineering, and the technology all line up. But this discovery doesn't just solve a mystery, it creates a much bigger one. How did a wonder built by a famous Assyrian king in Nineveh become a ghost story attributed to a Babylonian king hundreds of miles away and a century later? The answer isn't a grand conspiracy. It's not a deliberate cover-up, it's something far more common and perhaps more disturbing. A simple, catastrophic case of mistaken identity, born from the chaos of conquest. To understand the error, you have to understand the relationship between these two empires. They were rivals, but their fates were intertwined. When the Assyrian Empire finally conquered its great southern rival, Babylonia, they didn't just absorb its territory, they absorbed its prestige. For a time, the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, the seat of the new regional superpower, was sometimes referred to by a new title, New Babylon. In that simple act of rebranding, the seed of the confusion was planted. Now, picture the world centuries later. Alexander the Great's armies are marching through these lands. His soldiers hear stories from the locals, tales of a magnificent garden, a man-made mountain built by a great king. But the original context is gone. The details are fuzzy, polished by generations of retelling. The story is passed from soldier to soldier, from traveler to merchant, and with each telling, it drifts further from its source. Finally, these second-hand, third-hand stories reach the ears of the Greek historians back home, men who had never seen either Nineveh or Babylon in their prime. They have a fantastic story of a garden, and they have the name of a famous, legendary city, Babylon. The two become fused together. The story becomes anchored not to the obscure, hated Assyrian capital, but to the world-renowned, almost mythical name of Babylon. It wasn't an intentional lie. It was a historical echo, a story so powerful it survived the collapse of its own empire, but it became a ghost, detached from its home, and it latched onto a new one. The real wonder of Nineveh was sacrificed to create the beautiful, perfect, and completely phantom legend of Babylon. But this leaves us with a final, more unsettling question. What does it say about us that we chose to believe in the beautiful phantom for 2,000 years, while the evidence of the real, darker, more impressive truth was lying in the dust, just waiting to be read? That final question is the most unsettling secret of this entire story. Because this was never really about a garden. It has always been a story about us. It's a brutal lesson in how history is written and how a beautiful, simple lie can be infinitely more powerful than a complex and violent truth. We chose the romantic fable of a lovelorn king in the celebrated city of Babylon because it was easy, because it was pristine. And in doing so, we willingly ignored the verifiable, documented, and far more impressive engineering masterpiece of a ruthless tyrant in Nineveh. We chose the fairy tale over the forensic evidence. And that is the ultimate revelation. The story of the Hanging Gardens reveals the true nature of power. It isn't just the strength to move 2 million blocks of stone or reroute a river. That kind of power fades. The real, enduring power is the ability to control the narrative, the power to shape memory, to erase a rival's accomplishments from the record, and to make the entire world search for a ghost in the wrong place for more than 2,000 years. Sennacherib built a wonder of engineering, but the ghost of Babylon built a wonder of narrative that conquered history itself. It forces us to look at every story we've ever been told, every accepted fact, and ask one final uncomfortable question. How many other histories are just beautifully told lies?